Hello friends, I'm Dr. Khalil and in this video we'll talk about the imaging findings of mucormycosis. So in this discussion, we will discuss mucormycosis firstly by understanding what is a causative agent, what are the predisposing risk factors, the clinical manifestations, the different types of mucormycosis before we go into the details of imaging of mucormycosis. Mucormycosis is caused by a very commonly present fungi, which is a saprophytic fungi growing on the dead, decaying and spoiled vegetative matter, organic, matter as well as in the soil. So, this saprophytic fungi belonging to the genera of Rhizopus, Mucor and Apsidia are responsible for mucormycosis, and Rhizopus being the more common cause of mucormycosis. Remember, mucormycosis is an aggressive life-threatening fungal infection. This fungi produce necrotizing infection as well as angioinvasion, and because of the angioinvasion, they produce vessel thrombosis, which can lead to tissue necrosis, and this leads to the characteristic necrotic eschar, the black necrotic eschar that you see, which is a very characteristic feature in these patients of mucormycosis. Is it a pigmented fungi? Please remember, this is not a pigmented fungi, okay? It is not a pigmented fungi. The name black fungus is derived because of the presence of the black necrotic eschar in the nasal cavity on the palate. Because of the tissue necrosis, it develops this black necrotic eschar, and that is responsible for this name of black fungus. There is, pigmentation over the skin, there is pigmentation of the nasal cavity, the black crusted eschar that is developed on the nasal cavity and palate gives it the name the black fungus. So, here you can see an endoscopic image where you see this black necrotic material as well as some pus coming there. So, this is your black eschar that you are seeing in patients with mucormycosis on an endoscopy image of the nasal cavity. Please remember, for the diagnosis of mucormycosis, a proper understanding of the clinical history and looking for underlying risk factors is important. The presence of this palatal as well as nasal necrosis gives you a strong suspicion for development of mucormycosis. And also remember, this fungus is necrotizing and also an angioinvasive pathogen. So, you will see lot of these findings of bone erosions, of vessel invasions, vessel thrombosis because of this necrotizing and angioinvasion of the fungus. And what are the important risk factors for development of mucormycosis? Please remember, mucormycosis commonly develops in patients with diabetic ketoacidosis, especially people who are having uncontrolled diabetes, repeated episodes of diabetic ketoacidosis. This predisposes for mucormycosis. Underlying neutropenia, corticosteroid overuse, COVID-19 in diabetes, right? So, especially COVID-19 and diabetes, there will be, worsening of the diabetes. There will also be, excess steroid use in these individuals, worsening the sugar levels, okay? So, COVID-19 and diabetes is an important risk factor that we are seeing. Immunosuppressed individuals, people on chemotherapy, people on immunotherapies, people who are having, organ transplantation, solid organ and stem cell transplantations, patients of any hematological malignancies, iron therapies, iron chelating agents like desferoxime in patients with hemochromatosis, where you have this excess iron overload. All of these, are important risk factors. Please remember, iron is a very, very important requirement for this fungi. So, whenever you have available free iron, as in case of, hemochromatosis, when you are having desferoxime therapy, as well as diabetic ketoacidosis. Diabetic ketoacidosis or acidosis will cause the excess serum iron to be available for the fungus growth. So, iron is an important contributor. Excess serum iron availability is an important contributor for development of mucormycosis. Any trauma, skin damage, right, can also, especially lead to mucormycosis development. There is this concept of, steam inhalation, okay, so, and causing nasal burns and, development of mucormycosis also as one of the causes. When you are having this hot steams that are taken, that can also cause nasal mucosal injuries and inoculation of the spores of mucormycosis. Renal failure is also known to be a risk factor. So, these are some important risk factors that you should keep in mind. Now, let's try to understand what are the various important types of mucormycosis. The important types of mucormycosis are your rhinocerebral, rhino-orbitocerebral and the pulmonary mucormycosis. Please remember, after inhalation of spores, these spores, once they reach the nasal cavity and the sinuses, they can go through the cribriform plate and involve the brain. That would be your rhinocerebral mucormycosis. And remember, the medial border of the orbit, the lamina papracia, is a very thin wall. And also, you also have congenital dehiscence on the medial wall of the orbit. And you will have this infection from the nasal cavity entering into the orbit through this defects in the lamina papracia and enter into the orbit, producing orbital cellulitis, inflammation of the orbital fat, and through the orbital foramen, the orbital vessels and the orbital foramen, as well as through the cribriform plate, can reach the brain, and that would be your rhino-orbitocerebral mucormycosis. These fungi are angioinvasive. So, through the orbital apex, it can also go and invade the cavernous sinus, can invade the internal carotid artery. So, this is an important thing to remember, that is a very angioinvasive fungus. And pulmonary mucormycosis also occurs due to inhalation of the spores. So, all these three are due to inhalation of spores of mucormycosis. And ingestion of the spores can lead to gastrointestinal mucormycosis. Ingestion of spores of these fungi can lead to gastrointestinal mucormycosis in immunocompromised individuals. A direct trauma to the skin can lead to cutaneous mucormycosis. So, wherever you have a direct trauma and the spores get inoculated on the skin, you may develop a necrotizing fasciitis, that is cutaneous mucormycosis. And a hematogenous spread to different organs is called as your disseminated type. So, these are the various types: the rhinocerebral, rhino-orbitocerebral, the pulmonary mucormycosis, which occur due to the inhalation of these spores, gastrointestinal due to ingestion, a cutaneous type where you have direct trauma to the skin, as well as a disseminated type of mucormycosis. And what would be the clinical features in the patient? The clinical features would be facial pain. There could be tenderness over the area of the sinuses, the maxilla. There could be nasal crusting, nasal erosions, right? You will see epistaxis, there is nasal crusting that may develop, and also there could be involvement of the orbit with orbital cellulitis, producing chemosis, ophthalmoplegia, proptosis in the patient, right? And the vision loss is an early finding that you see in mucormycosis. And also, there is ulceration of the nasal mucosa and the palatine mucosa, producing this black necrotic eschar, which is very characteristic of this disease, black eschar. So, whenever we have orbital cellulitis and sinusitis developing in an immunocompromised patient, please think of mucormycosis as an important differential. So, orbital cellulitis and sinusitis in a case of immunosuppression should prompt you to the diagnosis of mucormycosis. So, what were the important clinical features of mucormycosis? They can be nasal stuffiness, nasal obstruction and crusting that can develop, epistaxis, right, headache, facial pain over the sinuses mainly, proptosis, chemosis and ophthalmoplegia involving the orbit, fever and confusion. If it starts to involve the brain, you can start to have neurological manifestations, discoloration of the skin of the face and ulceration over the palate, and if it goes and involves the teeth, can also cause loosening of the teeth. A black necrotic eschar over the turbinates, nasal turbinates or the palate are very characteristic findings that you see in this mucormycosis. And now let's try to understand what is the important role of imaging in diagnosing of mucormycosis. Please remember, early and correct diagnosis and initiation of early treatment is very important in survival of these patients. And in the treatment, we are using toxic antifungal agents. We are using amphotericin B, posaconazole, and you know that amphotericin B is very nephrotoxic. So, to be able to start your treatment, and that too early treatment should be initiated, you need to be more sure of your diagnosis, and that is where your imaging will give you faster results. The definitive diagnosis is done by tissue biopsy, where you may have to go for an invasive sampling that can be delayed, and also may not be sufficient at times because of the sample collected could just have necrotic material. So, it is very important to rely on your imaging findings, but the definitive diagnosis is definitely a tissue biopsy. But to get early results, imaging will help you. And please remember, imaging is also very important to know the anatomical extent of the disease so that we can plan our surgical debridement in these patients. So, what are the different imaging modalities that we can use in trying to evaluate these patients of mucormycosis? Remember, we can use skull radiographs, the Waters view to look at the involvement of the maxillary sinus. We can use a CT scan, MR images, contrast enhanced MRI. And to evaluate pulmonary mucormycosis, we use the CT chest and the MRI chest. They can all be used in evaluation of the patients of mucormycosis. Let's look at the images now. Now, look at this skull radiograph, and I hope you can see on the right side the maxillary sinus is showing normal air inside it. But if you are seeing the left maxillary sinus, there is opacification of the left maxillary sinus suggestive of a sinusitis. You may sometimes see some bone erosions developing on the walls of the sinuses, right? So that can help you to think about invasive fungal sinusitis. If you have some involvement of the sinus with the bone erosions, think of invasive fungal sinusitis. Now, to understand the spread of infection when we are evaluating the CT images, it is important to understand the normal anatomical areas through which the spread of infection can happen in mucormycosis. So, let us understand some normal anatomical areas while looking at the CT scan images of the paranasal sinuses of the skull. So, you can see here, this is the nasal cavity, and from the nasal cavity the infection can set into the paranasal sinuses, and from there once the infection sets into the nasal cavity and the paranasal sinuses, it can then involve the medial wall of the orbit, the lamina papracia, which is generally the thin wall, and also it has some congenital dehiscence also. So, the infection can easily spread into the orbit involving the intraorbital fat, involving the recti muscle, producing ophthalmoplegia in the patients. Now, another important landmark on the skull CT scan that I want you to identify is your pterygopalatine fossa. This is the pterygopalatine fossa. So, this pterygopalatine fossa, which is marked as a star mark here. So, there is a pterygopalatine fossa, and once the infection from the sinuses or from the nasal cavity reaches this pterygopalatine fossa, it can gain access to different sites. It can enter the infratemporal fossa through the pterygomaxillary fissure. This would be the pterygomaxillary fissure. Right. So, this arrow is pointing towards the pterygomaxillary fissure, which connects the pterygopalatine foramen into the infratemporal fossa. And the pterygopalatine fossa can also be connected to the nasal cavity through your sphenopalatine foramen. So, the sphenopalatine foramen connects the pterygopalatine fossa to the nasal cavity, and it can also be connected to middle cranial fossa through this opening here, that is called as your foramen rotundum. So, this infection, once it reaches to this skull foramina, can go in different direction and can have an aggressive growth involving the brain, involving the orbit, involving the nasal cavities as well as the infratemporal fossa. So, here is another image showing the pterygopalatine fossa, which is connected to the nasal cavity by sphenopalatine foramen, which is connected to the infratemporal fossa by pterygomaxillary fissure, and which is connected to the middle cranial fossa through the foramen rotundum. So, the infection, once it reaches this area through the skull foramina, can go and invade different areas. So, it is a locally aggressive disease. Here is a sagittal view of the pterygopalatine fossa, and the infection, once it reaches the pterygopalatine fossa, can reach the orbit right through the infraorbital foramen, can reach the middle cranial fossa through the foramen rotundum, and there is a greater palatine canal where it can reach the palate. Right. So, we see this necrosis of the palate, involvement of the tooth, right. So, the maxillary tooth, all of this can be involved through this greater palatine canal. So, what are the CT scan findings of mucormycosis on a CT scan? So, you can see here, this is a coronal CT scan image, and you can see the infection involving the nasal cavity, the right ethmoidal air cells, and the right maxillary sinus with the mucosal thickening as well as some air pockets within. And if you observe carefully, you can see that the infection has spread and produced involvement of the recti muscles and the intraorbital fat. So, this is how you will see a isodense collection in the sinuses invading into the orbit. You may also see bony erosions, which are very important for diagnosis of this invasive fungal sinusitis. So, you can see here multiple bony erosions, involvement of the ethmoidal and the sphenoid sinus with bony erosions can also indicate towards a aggressive invasive fungal sinusitis. And please remember, unlike your allergic fungal sinusitis and a chronic fungal sinusitis where the contents tend to be hyperdense, here in acute invasive fungal sinusitis, the contents tend to be isodense, they tend to be similar to the brain parenchyma. So, they will be isodense in nature. So, please remember, unlike in cases of allergic fungal sinusitis or in case of chronic fungal sinusitis where the contents tend to be hyperdense, in acute invasive fungal sinusitis, the contents generally tends to be isodense. Now, look at this CT scan image of another case of mucormycosis, which is producing an acute invasive fungal sinusitis, right. You can see the right maxillary sinus showing this isodense collection, mucosal thickening, some air pockets within, and very characteristically, you are seeing these bone erosions, right? So, involving the floor of the orbit and the infection extending into the orbit. You can see a sagittal view also showing the infection from the sinuses, right, from the maxillary sinus, causing erosion of the floor of the orbit, invading into the inferior rectus muscle. Now, look at this contrast CT image. So, this is a contrast CT image that is shown to you from another patient, and you can see there is involvement of the ethmoidal sinuses, there is involvement of the orbit and the orbital apex, and this is extending into the cavernous sinus. And I hope you can see there is a filling defect within, right. So, there is a lack of contrast filling within the cavernous sinus. Look at here, this is filling with contrast, but there are filling defects noted on the right side. So, this is how it invades the cavernous sinus, producing cavernous sinus thrombosis. So, the infection from the orbital apex can go and involve the cavernous sinus, producing cavernous sinus thrombosis also. And here there is occlusion of the internal carotid artery. We know that within the cavernous sinus, we also have the internal carotid artery. And we know that you have a internal carotid artery within the cavernous sinus. So, you have a angioinvasive fungus which can invade the internal carotid artery and cause occlusion of the internal carotid artery. This is an MR angiography image showing the occlusion of the right internal carotid artery. Now, look at this another case of mucormycosis where you have the infection from the nasal cavity involving the orbit, involving the cavernous sinuses, as well as going and extending into the frontal lobe. So, this can produce frontal lobe abscess, frontal lobe involvement. This is rhino-orbitocerebral mucormycosis. And this is a 3D CT reformatted image, right. So, volume reconstruction image where you see the involvement of the nasal cavity, where there is involvement of the orbit and the involvement of the forehead, right. So, this is rhino-orbitocerebral mucormycosis, bone erosions, okay, and aggressive local invasion is a feature you see with this necrotizing infection of mucormycosis. Angioinvasion, necrotizing infection causing bone erosions is classic for mucormycosis. So, what is the imaging modality of choice for rhino-orbitocerebral mucormycosis? Is it Waters view, non-contrast CT, CCT, MRI or a contrast MRI? Please remember the investigation of choice for rhino-orbitocerebral mucormycosis is a contrast enhanced MRI. The contrast enhanced MRI is considered to be the investigation of choice for rhino-orbitocerebral mucormycosis, and this will help you look at cavernous sinus involvement, will look at the invasion into the internal carotid artery better, will look at the involvement of the meninges and the brain parenchyma. So, this is the investigation of choice, the contrast enhanced MRI, and will also tell you the anatomical extent of the disease so that you can plan your surgical debridement better. Now, look at this coronal T1 weighted contrast enhanced MRI. So, you can see in this image here, this is a coronal image, this is a contrast enhanced MRI image. So, if you see on the left side, the left maxillary sinus, the left turbinates, they are enhancing well. So, this is normal. But if you look on the right side, if you see the right maxillary sinus, you can see there is mucosal thickening, some non-enhancing necrotized areas, right. So, you are seeing this non-enhancing areas within the nasal cavity, ethmoidal air cells, as well as you can see there is lack of enhancement of the right nasal turbinate. The inferior turbinate is not enhancing. Compare it with the left side is showing good enhancement, but the right side it is infarcted and non-enhancing. So, this infarcted non-enhancing turbinate, that you are seeing, this is what is called as your black turbinate sign. So, this is your black turbinate sign, which is a classic finding on MRI for mucormycosis, black turbinate sign, which indicates there is an infarcted non-enhancing turbinate, the black turbinate sign. Now, let us understand some basic orbital anatomy. This area is the preseptal area in front of the orbital septum. On the anterior part, you have this preseptal area. Then the muscle cone, within the muscle cone, the fat is called as an intraconal fat, and outside it, that is your extraconal fat. So, you have a preseptal area, the postseptal area. In the postseptal area, we have an intraconal area and an extraconal area, intraconal fat and extraconal fat. And this is the orbital apex that we have. So, infections from the sinuses, from the nasal cavities can spread into the orbit involving the extraconal and the intraconal fat and the orbital apex that we can see on the imaging. Now, look at this MR images that are given to you. This is a T2 weighted MRI, and you can see that the vitreous is white, World War II, water is white on T2. And here you can see there is fluid collection, mucosal thickening involving the left maxilla, left ethmoidal cells, right, left frontal sinus. There is infiltration into the left orbit, pushing the eyeball more laterally. So, this is T2 weighted image showing the infection involving the left maxillary sinus, left ethmoidal air cells as well as the left frontal sinus, infiltration into the orbit and pushing the orbit more laterally. You're also seeing a contrast MRI here. This is a contrast enhanced MRI. You can see the vessels enhancing with contrast, right. So, this is a contrast enhanced MRI, and you can see that there is this, non-enhancing areas within the orbit, within the, preseptal area of the orbit, and you can see this infection having these non-enhancing necrotized areas also suggestive of your fungal sinusitis, okay, invasive fungal sinusitis. So, on the contrast enhanced MRI, you are seeing this heterogeneous enhancement, involvement of the preseptal fat, involvement of the orbit, some necrotized areas, non-enhancing areas within. And this is a diffusion weighted MRI. This is diffusion weighted MRI, and this diffusion weighted MRI is showing you this area of the infection showing a diffusion restriction. So, there is a diffusion restriction that you are noting on these images. So, this is how you will see on the MR images in mucormycosis. Now, look at this 65-year-old male post-COVID patient who was a known diabetic who came with facial pain. And when we got an MRI done, this is a T2 weighted sequence. You can see that the CSF is white. So, this is T2 weighted image, and you can see there is this mucosal thickening of the right maxillary sinus, some fluid collection there. And if you observe carefully, you can see some T2 hypointense areas within. So, this T2 hypointense areas involving the, ethmoidal sinus, involving the maxillary sinus. I hope you can see this T2 hypointense areas. On this image, you can see them better in the ethmoidal sinuses. There is this T2 hypointense areas which is infiltrating into the orbit, right. So, it is going into the orbital fat, right. The intraconal and extraconal fat are getting infiltrated by this infection, and these T2 hypointense areas, these are your fungal elements that you see. So, this fungal elements that you are seeing, the involvement of the sinuses, the orbital infiltration, T2 hypointense areas representing the fungal elements, all of this made the diagnosis of mucormycosis. So, what are the important imaging findings of rhino-orbitocerebral mucormycosis? You will see isodense mucosal thickening on CT scan with bone erosions. On MRI, the T2 weighted MRI, the fungal elements will appear hypointense, okay, they will appear dark or black in nature. The fungal elements will appear black. T2 weighted hypointense areas indicate there are fungal elements there. And on a contrast MRI, you will see non-enhancing infarcted turbinates which give that appearance of a black turbinate sign. So, whenever you have a patient of sinusitis with involvement of the orbit, orbital inflammation is there, and there is a rapid progression cause cavernous sinus involvement as well as intracerebral extension in a known diabetic or a immunocompromised individual, you should strongly suspect, okay, mucormycosis. The definitive diagnosis is by tissue biopsy, where on KOH mount you will see aseptate broad-based branching fungi of rhizopus and mucor. So, the definitive diagnosis definitely is a tissue biopsy. Now, what are the important complications that you expect in patients with mucormycosis? Please remember, this aggressive infection with angioinvasion can produce cavernous sinus thrombosis, multiple cranial nerve palsies, visual loss can develop, which is much more common than bacterial cavernous sinus thrombosis. A fungal mucormycosis invading the cavernous sinus, invading the orbit, produces much early visual loss than a bacterial cavernous sinus thrombosis. And frontal lobe abscess can develop because of the intracerebral extension of the infection, and you may also see involvement of the carotid arteries and the jugular vein, producing carotid and jugular vein thrombosis. And unfortunately, once there is advanced disease, even with radical surgery and the use of antifungals, the prognosis is poor. Now, let's try to understand what are the important imaging findings of pulmonary mucormycosis. So, in pulmonary mucormycosis, on a CT scan, you will see perivascular ground glass opacities. Remember, this fungus has an angioinvasive property, so you'll have this ground glass opacity in a perivascular distribution, which can then form large nodules and consolidations. You will see classic reverse halo sign. There will be a thick area of consolidation with central ground glassing. So, large consolidation, peripheral consolidation will be there in the periphery, and you will see a central GGO. So, this appearance is called as a reverse halo sign. You can also see halo sign as in case of invasive aspergillosis, right? Angioinvasive aspergillosis also produces that halo sign, where you see central consolidation and peripheral ground glassing. If you see such an appearance where you have a central consolidation and peripheral ground glassing, that is called as a halo sign. So, you will see a central consolidation and peripheral ground glassing, that is called as a halo sign. This is halo sign. So, please remember both reverse halo as well as halo sign can be seen. Reverse halo sign more in favor of mucormycosis, whereas halo sign more in favor of invasive aspergillosis, but both can occur, okay, in mucormycosis. You may see cavitations. The angioinvasion can cause pulmonary infarctions. Peripheral wedge-shaped areas of large consolidations and pulmonary infarctions can develop because of the angioinvasion. And on MRI, you will see a T2 hypointense rim because of the hemorrhage involving, because of the vascular invasion and hemorrhage, right, and the iron depositions. You will see the hypointense rim around the lesions here. And on a contrast enhanced MRI, because of the necrotized infarcted lung parenchyma, you will see no enhancement in the center of the lesion, that is called as a black hole sign. So, there is a vessel thrombosis, angioinvasion and vessel thrombosis, and there is a necrotized lung parenchyma giving that black hole like appearance on a contrast MRI. Now, look at this CT scan image in a patient of pulmonary mucormycosis. You can see that there is areas of reverse halo sign, there is peripheral consolidation with central ground glassing, and you may see this peripheral wedge-shaped areas of large consolidations and pulmonary infarctions that can develop. This is another coronal CT scan image where you see this classic reverse halo signs, okay, with large consolidations with central ground glassing, the reverse halo sign, very important finding that you see on the CT scan images of pulmonary mucormycosis. And this reverse halo sign, where you have this peripheral consolidation and this central, okay, intersecting lines of the GGO, which give the appearance of a bird nest. So, this is also called as your bird nest sign, okay. This reverse halo sign or the bird nest sign talks about that peripheral consolidation with central intersecting lines giving the appearance like a bird nest. So, that is your bird nest sign or the reverse halo sign. And what do you see here? Here you can see there is a central area of consolidation and peripheral ground glassing. So, when you see a central area of consolidation and peripheral ground glassing, this is a halo sign, and this halo sign can also be seen in case of pulmonary mucormycosis, more in favor of in angioinvasive aspergillosis, but can also be seen in mucormycosis. Now, look at this. This is an MRI, chest MRI that is done, and on this chest MRI, you can see that around the lesion, you see this hypointense rim there. So, this hypointense rim around the lesion, T2 hypointense rim, you can see that the CSF around the spinal cord is white. So, this is T2 weighted MRI, and you are seeing this T2 hypointense rim around the lesion in pulmonary mucormycosis. Now, look at this contrast enhanced MRI. So, you can see this is the contrast enhanced MRI that is given to you, and this fungus, which is an angioinvasive fungus, can produce infarction of the lung parenchyma, a necrotized lung parenchyma, which will appear non-enhancing on a contrast enhanced MRI, and that appearance of a non-enhancement of the necrotized infarcted lung parenchyma, this is called as your black hole sign. So, this is black hole sign that you see. So, on a contrast MRI of the chest, we see a black hole sign in pulmonary mucormycosis. So, another example here. So, this is a T2 weighted MRI. You are seeing the T2 hypointense rim around the lesion, T2 hypointense rim around the lesion, and this is contrast MRI, right, of the chest, and you see this black hole sign suggestive of a necrotized infarcted tissue. So, this black hole sign and T2 hypointense rim, this is pulmonary mucormycosis. Now, please remember, it is important to remember this imaging findings of pulmonary mucormycosis also, the reverse halo sign, the perivascular ground glassing. You also have to remember the T2 hypointense rim and the black hole sign, because only if you have a strong suspicion that you would go ahead and get a tissue biopsy done, and imaging will help you make that decision to go for that invasive tissue biopsy. And it is important to differentiate pulmonary mucormycosis from invasive aspergillosis. And it may not always be easy to differentiate them on the imaging. Most of these will appear having similar, overlapping findings. But there are some clues that can help you differentiate. Pulmonary mucormycosis versus invasive aspergillosis, if you compare, the pulmonary mucormycosis usually have more than 10 nodules in the lung. This has lesser nodules. And in pulmonary mucormycosis, you have a large area of consolidation, a thick large area of consolidation with central ground glassing, called as your reverse halo sign, which I showed you in the images also, the reverse halo sign. Whereas invasive aspergillosis has the classic halo sign. Halo sign we used to study with angio-invasive aspergillosis shows you the halo sign, whereas reverse halo sign is more in favor of pulmonary mucormycosis. Also remember, where else did we study reverse halo sign? In organizing pneumonias also, right? So in organizing pneumonias also we see reverse halo sign, but in cases of pulmonary mucormycosis also you see a larger consolidation with central ground glassing called as the reverse halo sign. And what are the other differences? Obviously, the tissue biopsy and the microscopy helps you differentiate it much easier. In pulmonary mucormycosis, in Rhizopus and Mucar, you see aseptate and broad branching fungi, broad based branching, right. So, they have this obtuse branching, more than 90 degrees branching, whereas aspergillosis is septate and it is having, acute branching, And obviously, aspergillosis responds to voriconazole, You can remember it like this, right? Aspergillosis, it is acute and it is septate and it responds to voriconazole. Can you see V also here? So, it is responding to voriconazole. It is acute, it is having septations, having acute branching, and it also has, response to voriconazole. Whereas pulmonary mucormycosis is resistant to voriconazole, and we use, what is the treatment that we use here? We use liposomal amphotericin B, posaconazole as your treatment in pulmonary mucormycosis. So, keep in mind these small differences. So, basically let me sum this up by using the mnemonic of black fungus only. So, we know mucormycosis is also called as black fungus because of the black necrotic eschar that it produces, right. It is not a pigmented fungi, but it produces black necrotic eschar on nasal and palatine mucosa, right. So, that is the reason the name came as black fungus, and this on T2 weighted imaging will show you hypointense fungal elements. Hypointense means what? Black fungal elements, right. So, black fungal elements on the T2 weighted imaging. On a contrast MRI, contrast enhanced MRI, you will see a black turbinate sign, a necrotized infarcted turbinate which is not enhancing, called as black turbinate sign, right. And in pulmonary mucormycosis, what do you see in pulmonary mucormycosis? In pulmonary mucormycosis, you see a T2 hypointense rim, right, as well as on a contrast enhanced MRI, we will be seeing a black hole sign on the chest MRI in pulmonary mucormycosis. So, this is black fungal elements, T2 weighted hypointense areas are black fungal elements, black turbinate sign, black hole sign on the contrast enhanced MRI, and T2 hypointense rim or the black rim around the lesion on pulmonary mucormycosis on a T2 weighted imaging. All of this you can keep in the name black fungus. And there have been reports of gastrointestinal mucormycosis also, and I hope you all have heard of this and seen this image in the newspapers and all, where they said that there was case of gastrointestinal mucormycosis where you had small bowel involvement, necrosis, and perforation of the small bowel that developed in the patients, right. So, this is gastrointestinal mucormycosis that can occur after ingestion of the spores. And what is this reason for developing mucormycosis in COVID-19 patients, especially in India? Please remember, COVID-19 worsens pre-existing diabetes and causes diabetes in normal individuals. And we are a diabetic nation, and the combination of diabetes, steroids as well as COVID-19 has given rise to this rampant increase in mucormycosis. Use of steroids which decrease immunity, the drugs like tocilizumab also have increased the development of mucormycosis in our patients. Decreased immunity, elevated ferritin and elevated cytokines which increase the serum iron. All of these increased serum free iron, which is very important for the growth of the mucor. And we all know COVID-19 produces vasculopathy, right? The endothelial cell injury, micro and macro thrombi, and this fungus is an angio-invasive fungus. So, this will also increase the chances of developing this mucormycosis. And the use of various antibiotics, we are using various antibiotics, and this plethora of antibiotics that are being used, the normal commensals are being lost and the fungi can grow more rampantly. And steam inhalation is also said to be one of the cause, where you have this hot steam inhalation sometimes can cause nasal mucosal burns, increasing the chances of infection. And poor hygiene, contaminated masks, contaminated cylinders can also be a cause. We have to wait for the knowing the exact cause, why such a proportion is there. These are all the, hypotheses that we have, that all of these could have led to increased mucormycosis in COVID-19 in our patients. So remember, this is a life-threatening and an aggressive disease with, poor outcomes. So it is very important for us to use steroids judicially and use our antibiotics judicially, teach our patients not to self-medicate with steroids, and to check their and control their sugar levels, especially when they are under steroid therapy. Very, very strict glycemic control is important, and also teach them the early signs so that we can treat this disease much early before there is intracranial extension or other complications. And I hope you liked this detailed discussion of the imaging findings in mucormycosis, and I hope you enjoyed this session. Thank you so much.